on Talking Points. Democrats have issued their own version of Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunez's current controversial memo. The document has been sent to President Trump's desk where it awaits approval.
The Pentagon has a new policy on nuclear weapons. We break down the Defense Department's new look and what caused its release.
And Syracuse University students got together in support of Puerto Rico. Zach Levine has more ahead. This is Talking Points. Our top story tonight. At midnight, the current stopgap spending measure expires and the government may shut down. Good evening, I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. The government has several potential solutions on hand. We'll break down all the options.
With just hours ahead of the impending government shutdown, the Senate is expected to vote on a budget deal organized by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. This deal, which is expected to pass, has been temporarily curbed by Republican Senator Rand Paul.
Mitch McConnell requested unanimous consent to bring the bill to an earlier vote. This means that in order for the Senate to vote upon the deal, all of the senators must agree to take a vote. As of right now, Rand Paul is holding out, wanting a vote on his amendment, which intends to restore budget gaps. A cloture vote is currently set for 1 a.m., where it is expected that Rand Paul will concede and the Senate will vote on the bill.
Now, Josh, the longest that Senator Paul can hold out to is Saturday morning. We are expecting that he'll give up around 1 a.m. tonight during that cloture vote. So it may look, as of right now, it looks like the government will shut down for a few short hours in the middle of the night. The real question becomes whether or not it'll pass in the House.
Right. I think that it's a minor sort of subjection to that. But ultimately, if Pelosi, who is a giant opponent, stands away and kind of lets more of this sort of stopgap environment continue, it's going to be tough to see what will eventually come. So
well, the most conservative members of the House have already signaled that they're going to vote no. Nancy Pelosi yesterday said she's a no vote. However, so Rand Paul, he does believe like he has the votes. He is going to need some Democrats, but ultimately President Trump has tweeted out his support of the bill. I'm thinking the government shutdown only lasts a few hours.
I'm thinking that as well, and I think that that's ultimately going to kind of be the end of this battle, but it definitely is a telltale for how work is going to get done within this next year. So,
the main reason, right, that Nancy Pelosi is against this is because Speaker of the House Rand Paul has not guaranteed the same sort of DACA debate that Mitch McConnell gave to Chuck Schumer. So while I do think it'll pass, it'll be really interesting to see, if they do have this DACA debate in the Senate, whether or not they'll have the same in the House. I'm not so sure.
Well, if they can carry over in terms of time and discipline, it will ultimately come down to whether or not they can get a deal done fast enough and whether Democrats are able to kind of find their way and create sort of an equal footing. So we'll certainly keep
We'll be watching it throughout the night.
And we'll be watching it throughout the night. Last week's FISA memo generated a storm of controversy as Chairman Devin Nunes implied the FBI used faulty information to acquire a warrant to look into President Trump. However, Democrats say the memo does not contain the full story and have gotten their own version of the memo through both houses of Congress, where it faces presidential approval. Talking Points analyst Jack Watson breaks down the specifics for us. Jack?
Thanks a lot, Mike and Josh. The Nunez Memo, or FISA Memo as some are calling it, has dominated political spheres for the past week or so. But what does the memo actually say, and is what the memo says true? Well, the California Republican congressman and his staff drafted this memo right here. It's not that long. It's actually only about 3.5 pages long, which alleges that the FBI used biased information to obtain a FISA warrant to look into a Trump 2016 campaign advisor and the FBI's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. That campaign staffer is Carter Page, and the FBI says that much of the evidence that the FBI based on for its application for a FISA warrant is based on the Steele dossier, and that spy, of course, was Christopher Steele, the former MI6 officer who was hired to investigate some of Trump's ties to the Russians during the election. Now, what Democrats have said about the issue here, Adam Schiff, who is one of the top Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee, has called the memo misleading, and he says the popularization of the memo is a distraction to the larger issue of Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election and Special Counsel Bob Mueller's investigation into it. They have a rebuttal to the GOP memo, which is 10 pages long, and the deadline for that to be released is Friday.
Now, Conor, President Trump has said that the Nunez memo totally vindicates him from the Russia probe. How much truth is there to that? Does it vindicate him?
In short, no, it doesn't, and there's several reasons to that. Number one, although the crux of the memo is that it's the controversy behind the Steele dossier that really kicked off this investigation, it also concedes that what really ignited the FBI investigation was Papadopoulos speaking to that Australian diplomat under the influence of alcohol back in June. That's what ignited this. And number two, even if we can say for certain, let's just say that it is true that the FBI was able to confuse the judge or trick the judge into giving them this FISA application, not telling them that the Clinton campaign was behind the dossier. It's still, the FISA court still renewed 3 different warrants to investigate Page, and the way that works is they have to be able to still bring more presidents to be able to continue under that warrant, and they investigated him for a year.
And when we talk about continuing that sort of exploration, Jack, that Democratic memo that you mentioned, what can we expect from that?
Well, it's basically going to be a response to what the Republicans said in this memo right here. What I would expect that to say is basically along the same lines of what the Democrats have been saying about this memo for the past week or so. It's a distraction to the larger issue of the Russia investigation, and it's essentially just a big waste of time when considering that Bob Mueller's trying to conduct an investigation. That's, in my mind, what they would say.
Now, Conor, we have the GOP memo, we have the Democratic memo. They're at odds. The Democratic memo rebuts the other one. So we have these dueling memos. Where exactly can we find the truth in between both of these?
The truth is in the FISA application from the FBI itself. Really, the only way for us to see who's telling the truth, what's false, what's factual, is to see the application itself. Because right now, it's turning into a political spin. We've seen, certain things that are definitely backing, Republican beliefs in the Nunez memo, and I'm sure we'll see the same in the Democratic memo if or when it's released. So to really get down to the bottom of it, we have to see the direct source.
And in terms of getting down to the bottom of it, the FBI and the White House have been feuding over this for a long period of time, but this public behavior doesn't seem to have a precedent, does it really?
Not really, and it just shows, it's a testament to the uniqueness of this administration and how openly these two organizations can be infighting, because Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, has basically said, as the legislative branch, we're supposed to be a check on the executive branch to make sure they're doing what's right. And in the Republicans' eyes, in the Republicans who drafted this memo's eyes, that's not what the executive branch is doing. That's not what the FBI is doing.
Certainly a unique position that both parties find themselves in, and certainly something we're going to be keeping our eye on. Both of you, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll discuss the Pentagon's new arms policy and take a look at a rally in support of Puerto Rico featuring SU students. We'll be right back.
Looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Smokey, catch. Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb. But if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving. The ultimate party foul.
The Pentagon released a new nuclear arms policy last week which calls for the introduction of new weapons. While this ends President Obama's effort to reduce the size of nuclear weapons in defense planning, the Pentagon insists that it remains committed to the global elimination of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. Tonight we are joined by Thomas St. Sabrina Maggiore to talk about what this means for international diplomacy. Both of you, thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you very much.
So first we'll go to Sabrina. What are some of the big changes that we can expect as a result of this new policy?
So the biggest change is that we're getting away from the policy of denuclearization that we had in the 2010 Nuclear Posture Review. And we're moving towards modernizing our nuclear weaponry. Specifically, the posture has outlined plans to first invest in sustaining our nuclear weaponry and then ultimately invest in modernizing the weapons and the infrastructure of our nuclear weapons overall.
And another big point is that there are going to be really an introduction of two new weapons that we're seeing. First is that we're going to see the introduction of low-yield nukes on submarine-based missiles. Now, what that means is now, when you think low-yield, it doesn't sound perhaps as serious, but it can inflict about the same level of damage that the Hiroshima bombing did. So this is extremely significant with the capacity that we're talking about. We're also looking at a reintroduction of a missile that was actually kind of scaled back a little bit under George H.W. Bush and completely eliminated from our arsenal under President Barack Obama, which was the submarine-based cruise missile. And that's something that's a little more long-term, but those are really two new developments that we're going to be seeing.
And Sabrina, why implement this new policy now? What's the timing of this?
So the nuclear posture essentially pinpoints Russia and China as sort of main causes for our need to advance our nuclear arsenal. They specifically say that since the 1980s, which was the last time we modernized our nuclear weaponry, China and Russia have been extremely aggressive in modernizing their forces. And so in order to compete with them and ensure that we have a policy of deterrence that's strong enough to compete with Russia and China, we have to be modernizing our weaponry.
So that policy of deterrence and that following sort of the same sort of mantra of being prepared. So what are kind of the global implications in terms of policy and conflict that, you know, are prompting this new development?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, the last time we even looked at this policy was 2010 when we decided that we were going to scale back on some of our nuclear advancements. Since then, just like Sabrina said, you know, you've seen advancements from China and Russia who have continued building their nuclear weaponry. So some of the global implications, I mean, critics have pointed to, you know, could this start an arms race? They've also pointed to the fact that this policy might not best equip the United States when it comes to negotiating with other countries to scale back on their nuclear weapons. On the other hand, proponents of this have quite frankly argued the opposite. They've been saying that by increasing our nuclear weapons, that'll give us a little more perhaps strength when we come to the table, and it will, you know, perhaps persuade Russia and China to scale back a little bit more, showing what we're capable of.
A policy of deterrence that ultimately we haven't really seen people scale up with in a modern era outside of the Cold War. So it certainly creates this dichotomy where we don't exactly know what it's for, but it's entirely necessary in order to remain competitive on a global scale.
Absolutely. And one thing to note, though, in light of all of this, we still have to remember that there's a New START treaty that's in effect right now, and that will be in effect until 2021, February 2021. And that's a treaty between Russia and the United States that sets aggregate limits on our nuclear weaponry. So we are still limited and are, according to the posture, going to be abiding by this treaty until there's further changes.
And Thomas, what about the White House? Have we heard anything from them on this matter?
At the moment, actually, we heard about this back in January. That was the first time we heard about it. And one of the reasons that people have had a little bit of concern about this, and what some of the critics have been saying, is Trump's had very strong rhetoric, especially towards North Korea, saying that we were going to respond with fire and fury. And critics are saying, you know, is this kind of that step? On the other hand, you've seen out of the Pentagon, they're, you know, trying to assure people, look, the end goal is to, you know, pretty much denuclearize the world, but it starts with the United States kind of leading those efforts.
If this is the first step towards the denuclearization, we'll definitely be paying attention to the next. Both of you, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much.
Over 1,000 New Yorkers across the state joined Governor Andrew Cuomo and Governor Riccardi of Puerto Rico in a rally to support the recovering island Commonwealth. Syracuse University students also joined the rally. The university is home to over 100 students, faculty, and staff from Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. Reporter Zachary Levine has more on that event.
A total condemnation of the federal government.
Governor, I want you to know that what this federal administration has done does not represent the feelings of the American people. They're representing their own views and their own politics, but not the feelings of the American people.
The events here in Syracuse were part of a larger rally that took place in multiple locations statewide, all centered on a speech Governor Cuomo is making in the South Bronx in support of Puerto Rico. The event in New York also included speeches from U.S. Representative Jose Serrano and Puerto Rico Governor Ricardo Rosselló. Many Puerto Ricans here in New York believe Cuomo represents far more hope for the island recovery efforts than President Trump does.
Governor Cuomo also knows that a big constituency are Puerto Ricans, and we have always supported Governor Cuomo at the polls and continue to do so, as you can see by his outpouring of his own support on behalf of our people.
While most of the people at the rally supported the state in its Puerto Rico recovery efforts, very few had anything positive to say about what the federal government has done for the island.
Our county and state government that are inspiring characters that make us feel like when tragedy happens, our people will do their best. Sometimes we don't have the resources or the means to help in the way we want to, but at least that they're going to try to do their best to help.
For Talking Points, Zachary Levine.
Coming up next, North Korea has gained access to parts for its missiles. Find out how after the break.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham-bam minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate, and it's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Currently, there are tough negotiations going on at the United Nations Disarmament Conference. And despite positive signs from North Korea and South Korea, American relations with North Korea remain very tense. With new information coming out of Germany, Talking Points science and technology analyst Josh Feinblatt is here to tell us about where North Korea is with their nuclear program. Josh?
Thanks, Mike. Currently, North Korea is our biggest threat, at least on an international level. And with the nation's ever-advancing nuclear program, the possibility of a cold or hot war nears closer every single day. Just 11 months ago, North Korea launched 4 ballistic missiles, 3 landing off the coast of Japan, and just this week in the United Nations Disarmament Conference, Robert Wood, the U.S. Disarmament Ambassador, said, quote, North Korea may now only be months away from the capability to strike the United States with nuclear-armed ballistic missiles, end quote. And that's all worrisome by itself, except just this week, Germany's intelligence chief said that North Korea has been acquiring technology to advance its nuclear program through its embassy in Berlin. Apparently, North Koreans use shadow buyers and bought objects that could be used for both civil or military purposes. And in 2014, a North Korean diplomat tried to buy a monitor that measured gas emissions during the production of chemical weapons, and that is not a very good sign, guys.
Josh, this is obviously not allowed. How can this even happen?
Sure. So we think this began in 2014 with that little monitor, but it happened in 2016 and 2017. There's German evidence of purchases, but North Korea is rejecting it, saying that they didn't do this. But there's pretty good evidence considering late last year, the United Nations released that North Korea bought $200 million of banned goods worldwide. So, and the German Foreign Ministry said it wasn't aware of illegal activities, which is kind of interesting when they released this, but we'll see where it goes with that.
And Josh, the program for nuclear weapons that can reach America, that's been advancing in the last several months. How close are the North Koreans to obtaining that?
Sure. So we're thinking 2 months away, a couple months away. That's what at least the Robert Wood, the disarmament ambassador, said. But they tested missiles, North Korea tested missiles in July that could reach Chicago. So those are the ones that don't enter space and re-enter. So it really depends. They're close, if not there already.
Well, certainly something to watch, especially after the Olympics, when I'm sure things may start to rise up again.
Of course.
Thanks, Josh.
After the break, we'll take a look at some of the stories you may have missed. Talking Points will be right back.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did cats go on vacation? New York.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Some stories don't receive the mainstream coverage that they deserve. This week on Talking Points, we find out how much money the Defense Department lost and look into an ongoing investigation into the Philippine president. The Defense Logistics Agency cannot account for more than $800 million. After Ernst & Young performed an internal audit, the Defense Department is under fire as it is being held accountable for failure to document hundreds of millions in construction projects and computer systems. The DLA has never undergone a full audit, and with their weak financial management and messy books, there's doubt there will ever be one.
According to a Defense Logistics Agency spokeswoman, the DLA did not expect to attain a clean audit as they were the first agency of its size to endure an audit. The agency claims that although there were shortages, there was no loss of accountability of real property or associated funding. The DLA, which employs 25,000 people and runs on a $40 billion budget, has plans to improve their financials for a 2018 audit. This information arrived only a few hours prior to President Trump advocating for billions of dollars in additional funding.
The International Criminal Court is opening an investigation into the president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, over his role in extrajudicial killings in the country's escalation of the war on drugs. The investigation is preliminary, with the goal being to build a strong case against the 72-year-old president. Duterte may have been involved in such actions since the late 1980s, when he was mayor of the southern city of Davao. During his campaign for the presidency, Duterte encouraged police officers to execute drug suspects and made a promise to kill 100,000 criminals in his first 6 months.
Officially, Filipino police report that 4,000 drug users and dealers have been killed as a result of the campaign, but international rights agencies say the members may be much higher. Duterte has said that he welcomes the decision of the court and emphasizes that the campaign is a legitimate police and military operation. The Filipino lawyer who filed the official complaint has said he hopes that an arrest warrant will be issued for the president and his collaborators.
And after the break, Josh and I will take a look at some stories we think will be big this week.
go. We're gonna go out there in the rain. You're gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Go, bro. Oh, look at the rain. Okay, quick. Oh, yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. So wet.
As the Olympics get underway on the Korean Peninsula, the global community will be watching to see how Pyeongchang and Pyongyang coexist in a close and competitive environment. The North and South will be a part of a joint women's hockey team and march together under a unified Korea flag during the opening ceremony for the Games. Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong will attend the Games, with no meeting or talks with the U.S. or any foreign officials have been confirmed. I'll be looking ahead to what that means for the future of diplomatic relations.
And as we spoke about at the top of the show, later tonight, Congress may pass a bipartisan 2-year spending bill. With funding security longer than the current Congress is used to and a delayed debt ceiling, the slate would be clean for lawmakers to pass breakthrough legislation. During the coming months, a DACA debate like Mitch McConnell promised could lead to an actual bill. I'm looking ahead to that effort and many more. And Josh, we actually do have a couple of updates to make here tonight. The White House has issued a statement saying they are preparing for the worst of a government shutdown tonight. And Senator Lindsey Graham is now joining Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, asking for a unanimous vote so they can get things going on this bill.
Right. It certainly means a lot in terms of the fact that they're trying to get it going, but it's also you have people who are creating sort of a stopgap environment still. Rand Paul is still asking for gaps on funding, which is going to create a problem in terms of getting from one step to the next, and then it has to go through the House. So we're looking at a much more long-term scaled thing rather than Paul Ryan just saying, no, we're going to have a unanimous vote and pushing it through tonight. It's highly unlikely, and I think this is actually going to last a little bit longer than we expected.
I'm going to disagree with you there. I think the position still holds the same as the beginning of the show. We always were thinking that Rand Paul was going to hold out to that cloture vote because in order to invoke that, they need all 100% of the senators to vote yes. Rand Paul is being the only one saying he won't do it because he wants his own amendment voted on. Chuck Schumer saying that's not fair. Then every senator is going to want their own amendment voted on. They want this bill to go through. So I actually think we will have a few hours of government shutdown tonight, but I think it's not going to last into Saturday.
No, I don't think it's going to last into Saturday, but I think it's definitely going to take some whipping by the majority to get this through. I mean, ultimately, we're not looking at a 5 a.m. turnaround. We're looking at later in the day because this is going to be, as you said, every person trying to get in their personal agendas.
Certainly going to be a long night in Washington, but if they are able to pass this and they have a 2-year spending bill, that's going to open up a lot of roadblocks and get things out of the way so they can do real legislation. Things like infrastructure that President Trump talked about in his State of the Union.
Right, and there have been concessions as we looked at with the military budget and spending there. It's a matter of if those major issues can kind of, get put together.
Well, we'll have to leave it there for now, but we're going to be monitoring the situation throughout the night. For Talking Points, I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. Be sure to check us out on CitrusTV.com, our Facebook and Twitter as well.
Have a good night, Syracuse.